You've met this kind of empath before. They don't argue. They don't raise their voice. They don't try to win. They just go quiet. And the moment they do, everything changes. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. But you can feel the distance. And if you're that empath, you already know something most people don't. That silence, it's not empty. It's overwhelming. Today, we're diving deep into the psychology of empaths who go quiet when they're hurt, and why their silence is one of the most misunderstood emotional responses in the world. Let's start with what everyone gets wrong about empaths. People think when empaths go quiet, they're being cold. They think it's a choice, a strategy, a way to punish someone. Like silence is something they decided to use in that moment. But empaths don't go silent to control the situation. They go silent because the situation is controlling them. See, when an empath gets hurt, it doesn't come as one clean emotion. It doesn't arrive in a simple, understandable form like just anger or just sadness. It comes as a flood. A rush of overlapping feelings that hit all at once, too fast to separate, too heavy to explain immediately. They don't just feel anger. They feel disappointment, confusion, emotional shifts, subtle changes in tone, unspoken meanings, all at the same time. They notice what was said, but also how it was said. They feel the words, but they also feel the energy behind those words. And that's where it becomes overwhelming. Because now it's not just about reacting, it's about understanding. And instead of reacting immediately, they absorb it, they sit with it. They let it move through them instead of throwing it back out. Because that's what empaths do. They don't just experience emotions, they process them deeply. And that kind of processing doesn't happen instantly. It takes time. It takes stillness. It takes silence. So what looks like distance from the outside is actually intensity on the inside. What looks like disconnection is actually emotional overload being handled quietly. They process before they express. And most people misunderstand that because they've never felt emotions in that way themselves. What happens in an empath's brain? Here's where it gets deeper. Empaths experience something close to emotional overload. Their brain doesn't just register what happened, it tries to understand everything behind it. Not just, what did you say, but what did you mean? What were you feeling? What changed in you? And even beyond that, why did that feel different this time? Was there something underneath those words? Did I miss a signal earlier? Their mind starts connecting dots most people don't even notice. Now imagine trying to answer all of that in real time, while the moment is still happening, while emotions are still rising, while the other person is waiting for a response. You can't. No one can process that level of emotional complexity instantly. So what happens? The brain does something very specific. It slows everything down. Not because it's weak, but because it's overwhelmed with information. And one of the first things that gets affected is speech. Words become harder to access. Thoughts feel incomplete. Feelings are clear, but explaining them isn't. That's why when someone tells an empath, just tell me what's wrong, they freeze. Not because they're hiding something, not because they're being difficult, but because the answer isn't ready yet. It's still forming. Because the truth is, they don't fully know yet. Not in words. They know something feels off. They know something hurt. They know something shifted. But turning that into clear language takes time. Because they're not just reacting to the moment. They're trying to understand it completely. They're still feeling it. Empaths weren't born shutting down. They learned it. At some point, they tried to express their feelings openly. They spoke honestly. They showed what they felt. They trusted someone enough to be real, and it didn't go well. Maybe they were told they were too sensitive, that they were overreacting, that they were making a big deal out of nothing. Maybe their emotions were dismissed, brushed off like they didn't matter. Or worse, they were understood in the moment, but later those same feelings were used against them, thrown back in arguments, twisted, turned into something they regretted sharing. And experiences like that don't just disappear. They teach you something. Quietly, repeatedly. So they adapted, not in a dramatic way, but in a gradual, almost invisible shift. They started holding things in, filtering what they say, thinking twice before opening up, until one day they realize something powerful. It's safer to feel everything than to say everything, because feeling is private, but speaking makes it vulnerable. So instead of becoming less emotional, they became more controlled, more observant, more careful with their words, more aware of how much they reveal. They didn't stop feeling deeply, they just stopped expressing it freely. And over time, silence became their safest place. A place where they could process without being judged, where they could feel without being corrected, where they could understand without being interrupted. And once silence becomes safety, it's very hard to let it go. Here's what nobody sees. When empaths go quiet, their mind gets louder. What looks like stillness on the outside is actually intense movement on the inside. They replay everything, every word, every tone shift, every pause in the conversation, every subtle change in energy that most people would completely miss. They don't just remember what was said, they remember how it felt, the exact moment something changed, the second the energy shifted, the small detail that didn't sit right. And once that starts, it doesn't stop easily. They ask themselves, did I miss something? Was that intentional? Did they mean it the way it sounded? Am I overthinking or finally seeing clearly? They go back and forth again and again, trying to find clarity, trying to separate assumption from reality, trying to understand whether what they felt was real or imagined. Their silence is not emptiness, it's analysis. Deep, constant, exhausting analysis. The kind that doesn't switch off just because the moment is past. While others move on quickly, laugh it off, ignore it, or forget it, empaths stay with it. They sit in it. They turn it over from every angle. Not because they want to suffer, but because they want to understand. Because for them, clarity matters more than speed. Truth matters more than reaction. So they stay quiet. Not because nothing is happening, but because too much is happening all at once. And they won't leave it until it makes sense. Here's what nobody sees. When empaths go quiet, their mind gets louder. What looks like stillness on the outside is actually intense movement on the inside. They replay everything, every word, every tone shift, every pause in the conversation, every subtle change in energy that most people would completely miss. They don't just remember what was said, they remember how it felt. The exact moment something changed, the second the energy shifted, the small detail that didn't sit right. And once that starts, it doesn't stop easily. They ask themselves, did I miss something? Was that intentional? Did they mean it the way it sounded? Am I overthinking or finally seeing clearly? They go back and forth again and again, trying to find clarity, trying to separate assumption from reality, trying to understand whether what they felt was real or imagined. Their silence is not emptiness, it's analysis. Deep, constant, exhausting analysis. The kind that doesn't switch off just because the moment has passed. While others move on quickly, laugh it off, ignore it, or forget it, empaths stay with it. They sit in it. They turn it over from every angle, not because they want to suffer, but because they want to understand. Because for them, clarity matters more than speed. Truth matters more than reaction. So they stay quiet. Not because nothing is happening, but because too much is happening all at once. And they won't leave it until it makes sense. Now here's the part most people don't expect. Empaths don't go quiet just to protect themselves. They also do it to protect you. Because when an empath is hurt, they see everything clearly. Too clearly. Not just the surface level issue, but the patterns behind it. The tone you used, the intention underneath your words, the things you didn't say, but still felt. And in that moment, their awareness sharpens. Almost like everything slows down, and they can see the situation for exactly what it is. And if they spoke in that moment, they wouldn't hold back, not out of anger, but out of truth, raw, unfiltered truth, the kind that isn't softened yet, the kind that hasn't been processed or refined. And that truth, It can cut deep. Not because they want to hurt you, but because accuracy in its raw form can be uncomfortable. It can expose things. It can reveal patterns. It can say things that are very hard to hear. So instead of saying something they can't take back, they pause. They step away from the moment. They let the intensity settle before they respond. They wait. They regulate. They give themselves time to turn raw emotion into something thoughtful and controlled. Not because they don't care, but because they care enough not to destroy something in a moment of pain. Because they understand something most people don't. Words said in emotional intensity don't just disappear. They stay. So their silence, it's not avoidance, it's restraint. It's emotional responsibility. And in many ways, it's one of the most protective things they can do for both you and the relationship. Here's the problem. Most people don't understand empath silence. They interpret it as rejection. They assume that if you're not speaking, you must be pulling away. So in their mind, your quiet becomes a message. You're shutting me out. You don't care. You're being distant. And because that interpretation feels real to them, they react to it. They push harder. They ask more questions. They demand clarity right now. They chase a reaction,